You're listening to certified financial planner Doug Goldstein, host of the Goldstein on Gelt Show, www.goldsteinongelt.com.
Okay, I'm very excited to have on the Goldstein on Gelt Show Deacon Hayes, who is a personal finance expert, and he's probably best known because he was once $52,000 in debt, and he paid it off in 18 months. He's been written up all over the place like U.S. News and World Report, Yahoo Finance, and in fact, he's so cool that I was even once a guest on his show talking about my book, Rich as a King. But Deacon, I'm really happy to have you here because I want to understand the mindset of people who get so deep in debt. And now that you're not that deep in debt, I kind of feel I can ask you, what did you possibly do to get you so far underground?
You know, it was just our average everyday decisions. You know, when I needed a car, my boss said, hey, you know, you're taking around luxury clients. You need to get a nice, respectable car. And he showed me an ad from the newspaper. He's like, you could afford this payment. I'm like, yeah, I can afford that payment. And then my wife and I get married and she's like, oh, let's go to Cabo. And I'm like, oh, we'll just put that on a credit card and we'll pay that later, And, let's go to college. And hey, by the way, I've got a lot of downtime. I could work, but I'd rather just not work. And so I'm going to get student loans. And, all those decisions compounding over time, they totaled up that $52,000.
Mm-hmm. So you get yourself deep into debt, little by little is the way you're describing it. It's not like all of a sudden, and there's a lot of people say, well, I took on college debt and all of a sudden I found I was $100,000 in the hole. And you're saying that's not necessarily the case. It can just kind of sneak up on you.
Yeah, absolutely. It can accumulate over time, one decision after the next, and then it just compounds, just like interest does for us when we invest, but in the way that we don't want to when it comes to debt. Why
do you think that debt is really such a bad thing?
Well, I think that what it does is it sets us backwards, right? When I looked at my wife and I, and we're in our mid-20s, and, we had a negative net worth, and I thought, wow, this is where we're starting life from, right? Now we have to unwind all of that debt just so we can get in the positive and then start moving forward. And so it ate away at our cash flow. So we didn't have money every month to do the things that we wanted to do, to travel, to give, to invest, right? To get a house instead of a condo. So the debt really was a limiting factor on the decisions that we made on a daily basis.
What about the people who say, for example, I'd like to have a mortgage because then I can free up more money for long-term investing. And they point out that, for example, today rates are pretty low. You can get a 25 or 30-year fixed rate mortgage and then put all that money aside that you are not putting into your house and invest it in things like the stock market. And they say over time, it's actually a much better investment. Does that make sense to you?
It used to, I don't want to say it makes sense. It used to be the way that I thought. But the challenge is nothing's guaranteed, right? Especially when it comes to the stock market. And so I had invested in 2 properties in the United States. And, when we had the Great Recession, each one of those properties was like 50, 60% below what I paid for it. My investments went down. So nothing's guaranteed, right? And so for me, paying off a debt is a guaranteed return, right? You no longer have to pay the 4% or the 6%, or if it's credit card interest, 20% to a lender. You now have that money that you can put towards your own investing strategy. So instead of trying to do that arbitrage of I'm borrowing 4 and I'm making 10, you're just making 10% and not paying anybody anything. Now, have people been successful doing that? Sure. But I would say I'm more conservative when it comes to finances. And my wife she very much wants security. And so paying off debt is definitely a priority for us.
We're speaking with Deacon Hayes, who has, along with his wife, paid off $52,000 in debt. He teaches people how to do it. Deacon, I'm glad you brought up this point about buying properties because probably one of the most common pitches that I get of people who want to be a guest on my show is they say, I figured out a system. I have a great system for making money in properties. You buy a property, you finance it from the bank, you fix it up, you get a renter in the property, the rent that he pays you pays your mortgage, and before you know it, you own the house free and clear and you've made a lot of money. And I'm sure that you've seen these sort of ads all the time and people who want to push this product. And of course, I always wonder, why are they so desperate to be on my show if this is such a good idea? But let's put that to the side. But why do you think that is such a bad idea? Because when they paint the picture, it sounds like it's all golden.
I've had the fortunate and unfortunate firsthand experience of doing this. So The things that they don't tell you are the costs that are involved, right? So, the HOA fees, the water, the sewage, the AC unit that needs to get replaced, the roof that needs to get redone, the parking lot that needs to be repaved for if it's a condo, all of those costs add up. The vacancy rate, right? Like, so you can't find a tenant because of whatever reason, or you select a tenant, but that tenant, you didn't know had some sort of problem and they punch holes in the wall, or they have kids and the kids use marker. This is all stuff that happened to me in a short period of time, and so if you have multiple properties, you can just exponentially see where the costs and the challenges come along. So have people been successful with it? Absolutely. But is it this get rich quick, easy strategy that's getting pitched? I don't believe so.
Okay, so you've gone through, you were, once a normal guy, and then you were deep in debt, and then you pulled yourself out of debt. How do you keep yourself out of debt? What are some tips you can give to people for just not letting themselves fall into that hole?
Yeah, so one of the things that was really helpful for us was, doing the cash envelope system. So putting limits around what we could spend in different categories. Because, what I found is there's really only 3 or 4 categories that people overspend on a consistent basis. It's going to be entertainment, it's going to be food, it's going to be miscellaneous, and then it could be something else that, whatever someone's individual situation is. So having an envelope system where you say, okay, I'm going to put $200 in this envelope or $300, and that's all I have for this month for that category. I don't know about you, but for me, using credit cards or things like that for those type of variable expenses, you don't think about the cost. You just swipe and swipe and swipe, and then all of a sudden, what should have cost you $300, you spent $700, and you do that over a period of time, and that just eats away at the resources that you have to achieve your financial goals. So that was very helpful. And then definitely having a budget, which seems very basic, but having a piece of paper where everything is on one sheet to where you can see very clearly this is your financial picture. That's something that we review on a regular basis just to make sure that we're on track and we're achieving our financial goals.
Do you think that people who on a monthly basis, in fact, earn more than they spend, need to keep a budget and keep track of all of their spending? Because they'll just say, listen, I'm not overspending, so I'm okay. Why do I need to deal with these details, which, quite frankly, can get to be a little bit annoying or depressing?
Here's something that I've kind of adapted over the years. So when your income rises and you do consistently make more than you spend, you got to have some sort of metric. So if it's not, you're not keeping a cash flow budget. You have to say, okay, is my net worth rising? Am I putting the amount in savings that I want to be putting in savings, right? You have to have, am I putting the college savings away for my kids that I want to be putting away? So if you're not necessarily tracking every penny, you got to have some metric that you track. And it would be one of those: investing, savings, kids' college, paying off debt, whatever it is, and then just regularly checking in on that metric. That way you could know without a doubt that, oh, hey, I'm still achieving my financial goals, even though I'm not setting a strict budget and looking at the cash flow every month.
Deacon, I know that you teach people a lot about getting out of debt, and one of the terms that you've often used is the debt snowball. How does that work?
The debt snowball is where you list your debt smallest to largest, regardless of the interest rate. And the whole idea is it's more psychological than it is behavioral, meaning that, if you have a $200 debt and a $2,000 debt, it's going to take you so much longer to pay off $2,000 than it will $200. So if you pay off the $200 first, you feel like you're actually getting somewhere. You're like, wow, I made some progress. I'm getting somewhere. So I'm going to keep moving forward. And so that's what we used to pay off $52,000 in 18 months. And it was so helpful because you feel those victories so early on that it just keeps the wind in your sails and keeps you moving forward. And a lot of times people say, well, should you do the interest rate first, right? The highest interest rate, because you'll pay the least amount in debt. What I found is it's really, if you pay off the smallest debt first, is the most effective because you get those victories and you keep going. And that's what was effective for me. And I've taught hundreds of other people and they've had that similar success as well.
All right, that sounds great. Okay, Deacon, we are just about out of time, but I know you really have taught a lot of people, and I'd like to let our listeners find a way to learn more from you. So what's the best way to follow you and follow your work?
The best way is to go to wellkeptwallet.com. And I'm also on Twitter at Deacon Hayes is the Twitter handle.
Okay, we will put links to that at the show notes of today's show at goldsteinongelt.com. Deacon Hayes, thanks so much for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show.
You've been listening to the Goldstein on Gelt Show with money maven Doug Goldstein. Check out all of Doug's money ideas at goldsteinongelt.com. Doug specializes in helping people who live outside the United States handle their U.S. investment accounts. If you have a question that you would like answered on the air or off, contact Doug at his website or send him an email to doug@profile-financial.com.